trends, specifically performance-based funding. So let's get into it. So, something I wanted to do today is go over the difference between a community college and a four-year university. Some people might not have a lot of experience with community colleges, and that would be me. I'm kind of in that boat myself. This class has really helped me gain a better sense of what community colleges do for their community, the students that they service, and it's been really informational. So, my TED Talk is really going to go over the funding aspect for community colleges and how important that really is for what they can offer to their students in their community. Um, so, community college, based on dictionary.com, is a non residential junior college established to serve specific community and typically supported in part by local government funds. Something else that they didn't put in there is state funding as well. That is a really big piece for community colleges and the funding that they receive. We'll also get into that a little bit more. Community college most oftentimes serve non-traditional students, and that is kind of in a reverse for universities. So a university, based on dictionary.com's definition, is an institution of learning of the highest level authorized to confer both undergraduate and graduate degrees. Traditional students are typically the ones who kind of go to university. More oftentimes, they might be coming right out of high school and they're really looking for that holistic or specific college experience. For a lot of people, when they think about college, it might be a university setting that kind of comes into their mind, where like the housing is a part of it and the dining and everything. And they're two very different institutions, and the community that they service is very different as well. So I kind of just wanted to go over those with everybody. And I also kind of wanted to go over the college cost. So this might not be surprising to a lot of you, but it's kind of the breakdown quickly of the different pricing. So private universities are on the much higher end. Those are very pricey when people decide to go to those colleges. Compared to a public university such as Grand Valley State University, kind of in the middle with the cost of attendance. And then community colleges are much more affordable, as you can tell, especially for in-state residents. And based on the research I have kind of done here, I have found that a lot of community college students are usually residential to that area. The in-state cost of attendance price is just something that's much more doable for them. So I kind of wanted to go over that. And then I did some research on funding for community colleges, and I found some really great information that I wanted to share. State funding is the primary source of funding for community colleges, and that fluctuates as economic and political conditions change. This shouldn't be news really to anybody, especially in this course at this point. But for me, it was really surprising to find out where community colleges kind of get their funding. I kind of assumed it was similar to universities or four-year public institutions or private institutions even. And they're really kind of at the mercy of government and state funding, specifically state funding. So as state funding fluctuates and changes, that really fluctuates and changes what community colleges can offer and what they kind of can get for their students. So decreased funding really equals more competition for community colleges as they compete for the same funding with other area community colleges. So think of all of the community colleges in Michigan, and with a terrible economic downturn, they all have to fight for the same funding that they were each separately getting. So like that in itself is just, it's kind of eye-opening to realize what they kind of have to go through, those institutions. Decreased funding also leads to reduction in programs and student services that are deemed non-essential. So that really had me interested, because the school that I chose to do a lot of my work for this class, the community college on, was Tallahassee Community College in Florida. Basically, a lot of what I wrote my papers on were their lack of resources that they offered to their students. it was a very large community college, and it didn't offer a women's center or an LGBTQ center. They had a lot of other resources, but the ones that seem really primary and really important that I think a lot of the student population today is kind of dealing with and really could use those resources, they don't offer. And that was really surprising to me based on the 14,000 students that school actually enrolls and kind of retains throughout the academic year. And then the lying source behind that is kind of that funding piece, and that's kind of what really got me interested in that. So performance-based funding is a model that a lot of states have kind of switched over to. They're in the transition of changing their funding models and how they're kind of getting their funding. If you haven't heard of performance-based funding before, it's based on allocating a portion of the state's higher education budget according to specific performance measures such as course completion, credit attainment, degree completion, and that's instead of allocating funding based entirely on enrollment. So a lot of community colleges, at least in the past, and there's still some today, that still kind of have that enrollment funding. It's really just based on the amount of student bodies they get enrolled in a year, and that kind of is basis for the funding that they receive. I personally have found some issues with that, as I've come to find that with that emphasis on the enrollment, all of the effort and focus is going in on that, and it's kind of being lost on the student outcomes. As you probably know, a lot of community colleges don't have really high degree completion rates, and I think that the fact that their funding and kind of their focus and where that's kind of based has a lot to do with it. So based on the research I did from Hartell College, right now they have found that 22 states have started to adopt the PBF models, which award community colleges funding based on contributions to positive student outcomes. So that's kind of what performance-based funding is and kind of what it does for community colleges. And I found this to be a really important piece of some of the research that I did for this TED Talk today. The American Association of Community Colleges urges colleges to embrace the diversity of their mission and students' base when budgeting, suggesting that leaders of community colleges should plan for a future in which the many dimensions of diversity in clients and missions continue to dominate the strategic environment. This suggests that a variety of efforts, from the education of individuals with disabilities to the support services required to serve an aging student client base, should be incorporated into the core budgeting and funding of institutions. So what I really liked about that quote was kind of that they were putting it all together, so that it all should just connect when it comes to funding and budgeting and student resources and college missions. They should all kind of work cohesively. That's something I really enjoyed about some of the research that I did, and I wanted to share that with everybody. And then I have my references in case anybody wants to look that up. And then, so kind of what I'm going to end this with is that saying, with the same goal in mind, students can look forward to achieving completed degrees, and community colleges can work toward the same goal with their students while ideally receiving better retention rates, status, and funding. So with the performance-based funding, the focus can be put on the student outcomes, which for the students is going to help them. It seems as if the focus for the community colleges is on the students and how they're doing and getting that retention rate up and getting those student outcomes up instead of the enrollment. Then the students are probably much more likely to have completed degrees from that college, which in turn will allow the community college to have a better status among community colleges, better retention rates, and then if they have that performance-based funding, they'll have a pretty good basis to go off for that. So that's kind of where my idea is kind of heading for the future trends for community colleges. So yeah, thank you for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.